Did you know the iPhone was the first commercially available virtual reality system? But not that iPhone. New technology isn't really Apple's forte. Back in the 80s, over 20 years before Apple made their first smartphone, a man named Jaron Lanier set out to design technology that, in his words, could transport your sensory system
into a reality that can be of any description.
VR was this unfathomable new idea, something out of a science fiction novel, which is wild because only a few decades later, and it's ingrained in our culture. Even if you've never worn a headset, you're likely familiar with the rhythm-based game beat-saber, or maybe the universally loved Ugandan knuckles.
Do you know the way?
I know the way.
You have to have a...
And if not, you've definitely seen the nightmare fuel that is Zuckerberg's up-and-coming metaverse. This new subsection of our culture had to start somewhere, and in 1989, Lanier's company, VPL Research, released the groundbreaking iPhone. Spelt EYE, of course. It looks almost identical to contemporary VR headsets, but there are some hilarious differences. Firstly, it weighed about 2.5 kilos, or 5.5 pounds. That's the weight of a small baby just hanging off your face. The target market for VR already had a chronic C-spine condition named after them called nerd neck. Not only does nerd neck curse you with an ugly looking posture, but it can be fairly painful. So the plan is to take a big wonky spine and hang a dumbbell off it. As if the academically inclined didn't have enough to be bullied over. Add in prolonged use of this weighty headset, and the nerd clique start looking like a flock of flamingos. Okay, while it might put your spine at risk, it was incredibly ambitious elsewhere. Instead of those phallic-looking controllers that most other systems use, the iPhone came with the data glove, which was one of the first examples of haptic technology. If you didn't know, haptic tech is designed to simulate the sense of touch, an exciting prospect for basement dwellers, as they could finally feel the tender touch of a woman. With the data glove, not only are you controlling your surroundings, but you're experiencing tactile feedback, further immersing you into this imaginary world. State-of-the-art haptics can be the difference between virtual reality and having a small TV strapped to your head. But 30 years later, and there's been no progress. If anything, we've lost sight of what virtual reality should be and stumbled backwards. Or have we? Before we get to that, we need to address the elephant in the room. A MetaQuest would cost you around $600. It's not pocket change, but we've come to expect a high price when buying top-of-the-line tech. Now, how much do you think Lanier's iPhone cost? And before you answer, this was in the late 80s. Not only before cloud storage, but before the DVD even existed. We're talking about a time where if you wanted to watch your favourite movie, you prayed to God the person before you had the decency to rewind the damn tape. Times were tough, but Lanier was here to transport us to a whole different world of possibilities, both figuratively and virtually. You can probably take your guess and add a couple zeros. Lanier's iPhone would cost up to $250,000. Tell me this, would you rather travel the world, visiting Tokyo, Dubai, Rome, maybe buy a small chateau in the south of France? Or, for the same price, strap a brick to your head, watch some low-res 3D graphics, and probably develop brain cancer? So coming back to the data glove, why don't we have good haptic tech available to us? The best we have is a buzzing controller, and controllers have been buzzing since the DualShock on PlayStation 1. So where's the evolution? Perhaps as soon as haptics are good enough, it's hard to distinguish between virtual reality and real life. And right now, reality as we know it is actually virtual reality gone too far. Meh, probably not. But imagine if haptics were that good. We could live in a real-life Sword Art Online. Without the genocide. Or Ready Player One. Without the homicide. Or Spy Kids 3. Without the awful CGI. But all that's unlikely to happen anytime soon, as haptics are very difficult to get right. Humans have an incredible amount of ways of sensing things, It would be extremely expensive and take so much time to produce a worthwhile solution. If only there was a billionaire in the industry that had an interest in innovation. Innovation that doesn't include new ways to scrape every bit of data you have to offer.
Senator, no, I would probably not choose to do that publicly here.
In a perfect world, Lanier would have billions in the bank, and we'd be much further along in this age of virtual reality. But he's too altruistic to make billions. When he's not playing one of his 60 instruments, he's busy warning people of the dangers of social media. Perhaps I'm being unfair. After all, if you take a look at the timeline, VR has come a long way. Starting back in the 1800s, breakthrough research showed the brain processes 2D images from each eye into a single 3D image. The stereoscope used this finding to good effect, giving the user a sense of depth. If this seems familiar, it's because it's used in low-budget headsets that attach to your smartphone. Jump forward to the mid-1950s, and a man named Morton made this hideous thing. The Sensorama was an arcade system that would stimulate all the senses, not just sight and sound. It had speakers, a 3D display, fans, a vibrating chair, and even smell generators. Pretty cool, but you wouldn't catch me dead in it. In 1968, Ivan and Bob created the first VR headset that was connected to a computer. I thought the iPhone was bad, but apparently this was so heavy it had to be suspended from the ceiling. A big scary looking thing, appropriately named the Sword of Damocles. An idiom for something threatening looming over you. Of course then we had our friend Lanier in the late 80s. And a bit later in 1997, VR was used to expose war veterans to traumatic triggers in a controlled manner, as an effective way of treating their PTSD. According to BBG, it's an effective practice used to this day. In 2012, the Oculus Rift went live on Kickstarter, raising almost $2.5 million. And more importantly, it illustrated the public's demand for VR entertainment. 2 years later, and Meta purchased it for $2 billion. Now in the 2020s, we're in the midst of the virtual age, having recently witnessed possibly the greatest turning point in the timeline. I love the idea of having no clue where technology will take us next. Imagine trying to explain virtual reality to someone from the 1900s. They'd have you committed to a psychiatric ward. Hello, I'm from the future. Put on this mask and we'll enter another reality. They couldn't possibly understand it. Apply that thought to us now in the present day. It's exciting to wonder what advancements we currently can't fathom. Whatever it may be, I'll be sure to cover it. So subscribe, so you don't miss out.